All right. The next one is from Daniel, who is in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. He says, Dear Big Al and Joe, I love your show. I'm currently serving active duty in the USMC, United States Marine Corps. I live in the barracks on base. I was wondering what your thoughts were on a home mortgage. Dave Ramsey says a 15-year mortgage and pay it off sooner, whereas Ric Edelman says to have a 30-year mortgage to help save on your federal taxes and invest it. And also, what are your thoughts on having a credit score? Dave Ramsey says pay cash, and Ric Edelman says to have a credit card. Love to hear back from you guys. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel.
Great question. And two very smart people, Dave Ramsey and Ric Edelman, have very different ideas on both of these concepts. So why don't we start with the mortgage? Kyle, why don't you take a crack at this?
Yeah, I think some of this is personal preference too. But I mean, you go to a 15-year mortgage, right? The payments is going to be a little bit larger. It's not going to leave you with as much excess cash. Whereas if you have a 30-year mortgage, maybe the payment's going to be a little bit lower. You won't get as good of a rate as the 15-year, but you might be a little bit more flush with cash. The challenge that we see sometimes is people don't take the extra cash and invest it, right?
Right.
They spend it.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. And so I think both approaches are good, to be honest. I did a 15-year mortgage because I was getting closer to retiring and I wanted the house to be paid off if I could. And that's actually how it worked out. So that worked out pretty good. The thing about a 30-year mortgage is on paper, that's generally going to work out better than a 15-year mortgage because in a low interest rate environment, like let's say the interest rate's 3% right now. And if you look at a globally diversified portfolio over the long term, you could probably earn 6 or 7, even 8%, right? So if you're paying out 3 and making between 6 and 8%, you're going to do better actually having a 30-year mortgage, which is exactly why Ric Edelman says that. Mm-hmm. The problem is, Kyle, what you just said, which is only a certain amount of people will actually save that money and invest it. Yeah, most of us tend to spend it. If there's money in the checking account, we tend to spend it. And I would say even couples where one of the spouses is very frugal, if the other one is not, probably the non-frugal one, if you want to stay married.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
There'll be a lot of debates and so forth. But when you do a 15-year mortgage, it's a forced payment. It's a forced reduction of principal. You're going to save interest over the term. You're going to lose that arbitrage. Arbitrage is the difference between what you're paying and what you're making. Mm-hmm. So both answers are fine. Both answers are good. Both answers are right, depending upon how you want to look at it. I've always had a 30-year mortgage until the last one that I got. I got a 15 as I got close to retirement. And so that's what I did. So that's just the, personal preference. I like the 15-year mortgage. You get a slightly better interest rate and you get that thing paid off. You're kind of forced to pay it off sooner. Right. We have a lot of people that are retired and they have a 15-year and they want to retire, but they can't afford the payments. So believe it or not, we sometimes tell people that retire, get a 30-year, because if they're house rich and cash poor, having a lower payment structure will actually help them to retire than a shorter payoff term. So it just depends.
Sure. Yeah, like you said, the cash flow in retirement is really, it's king, right? You want to make sure that you can manage the distributions out of whatever retirement accounts or liquidity that you have. And so making sure that payment is affordable and it's not going to burn through the portfolio in 15 years. Right.
Yeah. And the other thing we see is like someone would retire, maybe they've got a mortgage of $100,000 and they have $100,000 in their savings account and they pay it off. Mm-hmm. And then they've got no extra cash if something goes wrong with like a house repair or medical bill or car repair or whatever. And so that's not a great idea either.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes sleeping it well feels good, but you also want to make sure that, financially you've got a little bit of liquidity there.
Yeah. Well, like you said, cash is king and important. So what about the second question on Dave Ramsey says, pay everything in cash. Ric Edelman says, have a credit card.
Yeah. Kind of different flavors here. I mean, you could even probably throw in a third pundit too. It was like Kiyosaki, right? Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I mean, he just wants to leverage the debt and use as much debt as possible. Whereas you got Ramsey, and both are successful, right? They both have different strategies and ideas, but I kind of like the middle ground there with Edelman and kind of like the sweet spot, a little bit of both.
Yeah, I would say the FICO score, and I like Dave Ramsey a lot. I think he's very smart and very bright. I think FICO scores are very important. And I think I think it is good to have a credit card. Here's what I would recommend though, is use the credit card, maybe get mileage, but pay it off every single month, right? So that's the key there. If you have a credit card and you're not able to pay it off every month, then you're probably better off going to a debit card and just having it withdrawn from your checking account. Once you're done, you're done. You can't spend anymore.
Right.
And if you look at Dave Ramsey's, a lot of his listeners, they're people that have had financial difficulties. And so he's being real strong with them, saying, don't use the credit cards because so many people get into trouble with them. Right. So again, it depends upon the person. It depends upon you, your ability to handle this appropriately. I like debit cards just because it forces you to use your own cash, but then you don't necessarily build up the FICO score as well.
Right. Yeah. The other thing too with debit cards versus credit cards is sometimes if you get fraudulent charges and you use the debit card, you're kind of out of luck, right? The bank's not going to give you the cash back. Where you have a credit card, and, it's traceable. You can dispute the charges. Every once in a while, that comes up.
Yeah, it does come up, and banks are different. Some banks reimburse it, and some maybe a little bit less so. But
maybe I'm talking from personal experience here.
I'm with you, Kyle. I've gone through the whole same thing. Yes.
Yep. Got it. Yep.
Are you prepared for retirement? Schedule a free financial assessment with an experienced financial professional right online at purefinancial.com.